My name is Maddie Johnson, for those of you who I don't know, which is a lot of you, which is very exciting. I'm the Preventative Search and Rescue Manager with the Teton County Search and Rescue Foundation, and it is my job to bring education and community outreach to life that first and foremost serves our 37 volunteers that are on call 24/7, 365 days a year. And they do incredible work. In just this year alone, or since December 1st, they've responded to almost 50 calls in the backcountry. We had one just yesterday. That's a big lift for anyone, but remembering that these folks are ER doctors, they're parents, they're teachers, they're going on grocery store runs for that last fun trip, and then they get the call into the backcountry. So the work that they do is incredible. The work that we do for education is to serve them because they're incredible. And our belief within the Backcountry Zero initiative is the fewer call outs that they have to go to means safer experiences for all of them. And that said, they are really, really excited to help anyone in this community when they need it. If you are a search and rescue volunteer, give us a hand raise and let's give them a round of applause. We've got yeah, they're amazing. Find them after this and ask them for stories, etc. We are really excited for the first time really in Backcountry Zero's history that all community outreach and education initiatives are free. So you are here for free because we believe that if our search and rescue efforts are free, we should also have free education. That also means that we're really excited about donations so that we can keep this kind of thing going and continue to serve our volunteers. So if you haven't yet, you can head back to our table. We've got a lot of volunteers and staff members out there to help you. You can buy a hat, you can buy a thermos, or you can just give us your money if you want. We will get started shortly. I did want to bring up Kate Shelby first to say a couple words, and then we get to hear from Josie McKee right afterwards. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kate Shelby. I am here on behalf of the Community Foundation of Jackson Hole. I lead the Behavioral Health Initiative, and one of the projects that we have is TIPS, which is Teton Interagency Peer Support. And what we do is provide education, peer support, and access to free mental health care for first responders in our community. So that includes fire EMS, first responders includes ski patrol, search and rescue, sheriff's department, police department. I'm sure I forgot something in there. But thank you so much for supporting mental health in the mountains. If you're interested in any additional information, please see me at the booth after. In addition to that, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. We have 25 different community partners that are offering over 35 free events in our community. So feel free to check out the calendar of events. It's in the news and guide, as well as Buckrail and on the Community Foundation's website. Thank you.
Yeah, big shout out to TIPS. That's an awesome asset that we have in this community. Also, thanks to Francis and the team at the Teton County Health Department for supporting Josie's presentation tonight. Also, big thanks to Black Diamond, to Yeah Buddy, getting us free pizza, getting us free spaces. We're really, really grateful to be able to have an event like this. And like Kate said, Mental Health Awareness Month. In our work, we see a lot of data about who is getting injured and who gets in trouble and maybe who has made some mistakes in the backcountry. It's a lot harder for us to understand and accumulate data when it comes to mental health and stress injuries. So we're really grateful that folks like Matt Hansen, who did the Fine Line podcast, tell those stories, interview those people, bring that kind of data to life. But it's your experiences, your participation in this that ultimately underlines the importance of it. And we're really grateful that you all, like us, believe that mental health is in fact a backcountry safety issue. And we believe that if you are prepared in the mental side, the emotional side, the stress injury recognition side, you will make better decisions and be more rescue ready or responsive in the backcountry when you're choosing to enter high consequence terrain. So Josie McKee is here tonight from Lander. She's on the Lander Search and Rescue team. She was on YOSAR about 12 years ago. She was on that team for 3 years. She is a part of the Responder Alliance team, which she'll be talking about tonight, but that is a huge resource that our SAR volunteers and other first responders in the community lean on for some of this emotional literacy. And We are really excited to have her along with another audience member, Hunter Lee, on the Fine Line podcast getting recorded tomorrow. We are recording this presentation tonight for those of you who know folks that couldn't make it, but a lot of this information we're really excited to be captured in a candid conversation about mental health and stress injuries on the Fine Line as well. Season 9 of the Fine Line drops on May 29th, so stay tuned for those stories, and thanks again for being here. We really do appreciate it. Stop by, say hi to all of the tables in the back, and let's give Josie a warm welcome.
Patty, and thank you all for being here and being willing to hang out and listen to us tonight. So we're talking about mental health and trauma in the mountains, right? And this could be a pretty heavy topic. And I want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge that a lot of you in this room have probably been through something either firsthand or had friends go through things that were traumatic in the mountains. And also, the reason that we go into the mountains is because it's this magical, awe-inspiring place. And I think that those two things exist together. The fact that there's risk for bad things to happen to us, and the fact that the mountains are beautiful, wild places that we get to interact with. And so I just want to give a moment to think about that and let that sit with you. And then I want to focus really with this presentation on the mental health part of it, on that awe-inspiring piece, and how we can use that component to be more resilient because bad things do happen. So as I'm starting to talk, there's this photo up here that's this kind of wild, awe-inspiring place. I'm going to ask you all to get a little uncomfortable, but we're all mountain people, so you're good at being uncomfortable, I'm sure. I'm going to make this talk a little bit interactive. So if you're sitting next to somebody you don't know, you might have to share some things with them. But I want you to just start thinking about what it is that draws you to the mountains. Think about some of those moments that you've had out there that were incredible. Maybe, I'll grab this computer forward so I can actually click through. Maybe standing on a summit where you're like, I am the most badass human on this planet. Maybe it's spending time with friends in some cool place that you guys just shared a fun objective together. Maybe it's just a moment taking in a beautiful sunset or sunrise and just letting it sink in. If you feel comfortable right now, I want you to go ahead and just close your eyes and just imagine one of those scenarios for yourself. What really makes it magical? See if you can bring your attention to more senses in that experience. What were the sounds around you? What were the feelings of your feet on the ground, or if you're climbing, your hands on the rock, moving through the snow if you're a snow person? Anything that you smell, or feeling the sun on your face or the wind on your face. That experience sink in for you for a moment. And you can open your eyes. And now is here where you're going to chat with the person next to you. You can introduce yourself if you don't know them. And I just want you to say 1 or 2 short sentences to describe what it is that makes being in the mountains important to you. And it could be something from that experience that you were just imagining, something else. Go ahead, go. I couldn't hear anything anyone was saying, but I could see your faces light up talking about this. So I'm hoping that you have that energy with you throughout this talk. So one of the things that I have found has kind of carried me along in my whole path of over 20 years of recreating in the mountains has been tapping into this sense of this awe, this fun, this what it is that I value. And I've lost that sometimes and I come back to it sometimes. And that is the thing that I want to keep coming back to for you all. What is it that you value, why you're going out there? Because that really is like, it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a good mental health experience for you to go out into the mountains. Otherwise, we wouldn't take those risks. So I'm going to tell some stories and I'm going to get you all to interact again a few times in here. So as Maddie mentioned, I work for the Responder Alliance, which is an organization that provides stress resilience education to first responders and outdoor professionals. And that's also expanding beyond to many different industries outside of those as well, because we've realized that stress impact is real in this world, pretty much for everyone. And the more we can recognize and understand how to build resilience and take care of each other, the better world we're going to live in. So I get to do that as my day job, which is amazing, and work with a lot of really amazing humans like you all. My whole journey with this started, as Maddie said, I think it was about 12 years ago, working for search and rescue in Yosemite National Park. And it was, as my colleague here that was on the search and rescue team with me, Ken, who's now working in the park here, as he said, it was one of the best times of his life, as it was for me too. When I showed up there, I was so excited to be able to live and work in Yosemite Valley and climb all the things. And it was just a dream come true to be there. And we were just getting after it all the time, doing these great climbing objectives and rescuing people and doing stuff that felt very meaningful. And that was my life for a few years. And it's still looking back, like it was one of the best times of my life. And this first story that I'm going to share, actually, before I go into this, how many people in this room identify as climbers? Awesome. What about skiers? Okay. That's expected. Not surprising. What about boating? Nice. What other kind of things shout out that you love to do in the mountains? Mountain biking. Yeah. Running. Awesome. Cool. We have a variety of different things and ways to engage out there. So climbing's always been my big thing. And I'll probably say a few things in here if you're not a climber that you're like, wait, what does that mean? Don't worry, it's not actually that relevant to the whole presentation. But for those of you that are climbers, you'll get a deeper window into this. So this first story that I have, I had been, this was toward the end of my time on search and rescue. And we were up on a kind of not remote, but like out of the way, off the beaten path climb. And my climbing partner and I were trying to establish a free climbing variation to an old aid route that had been done. So we were kind of forging new terrain here. And this picture is actually not of that, but it's a similar image that I could find that would illustrate it. I was going to go climbing across this slab, and it looked like I needed to traverse sideways about 30 feet to get into this other feature. And as I got directly off of the anchor, like 15 feet out, I just froze. The terrain wasn't that difficult for me to climb. It was like well within my means at this point. But for some reason, I could not make myself make another move. I couldn't decide if I should climb up these holds this way or this way. And then I couldn't even decide to down climb back to the anchor where I had come from. And I just remember like back and forth in my mind, like arguing with myself. of what I should do, and I couldn't move. So hold that thought. We'll come back to it. We all go out into the mountains kind of knowing there's risk. And sometimes it's really obvious. Sometimes we get scared and we're very conscious of the risk and that decision-making process of, should we do this or that to manage that risk? And sometimes we get a little complacent and it's in our subconscious until it's not, until something actually happens. And then it comes to light. Oh yes, there is this real risk. And sometimes, despite being very conscious of the risks that we're taking and making what seem to be all of the right decisions, still, sometimes bad things can happen. How do we manage that? How do we keep deciding that we want to go out there, knowing that there's risks, but knowing that we want to go? And I really think that managing that risk is about decision making. And it's not just about the decisions that we make in that moment of, do I do this climbing move or that? Or do I go based on the weather or not? But it's about the decisions that we make about who we are and why we're doing the things that we're doing, and the just day-to-day ways that we want to live our lives. And that not only manages the risks of the physical things that might happen to us in the mountains, but also that psychological risk of putting ourselves into situations that are hazardous and stressful and can impact us in the long term. So that's what this talk is going to focus on, is kind of that decision making, so that we can take known risks from a place of intention, and take those risks both emotionally and physically. So when you're going out, this question of, are you in the right headspace, is one of those things that can help you manage that risk. And I'll hit on that a little bit more. And then when bad things happen, what can we do to make it so that it doesn't get worse? So that we give good psychological support to those that need it, and we take care of our own psychology so that we're not as heavily impacted when something goes wrong. And then, can we come back to it? And if so, how? So these are the questions that I'm not going to answer, but I'm going to help you all think about so you can make good decisions for yourself. So going back to this place on the route where I froze, what I have come to know now is that I was stress injured at that point. I didn't have enough space in my brain for complexity, for making decisions that hadn't been already pre-directed for me, like following an established route. Because I had been, for the last few years, this is when I was in my 20s and I was really psyched, we were always going out, trying to climb the next biggest, hardest thing faster, pretty much every time we went climbing. And then we were responding to people that were out doing really similar things to what we were doing and finding them broken, injured, rescuing them. And those two things combined were extremely impactful. And I was carrying that stress with me as I kept pushing myself. And so what I now know is that I had a stress injury. So when does stress become a stress injury? I'm going to define stress for you first. So stress is a physiological process that is designed to help us respond to challenge. Like, one of the main parts of it is that it increases our heart rate so that we can fight or run away from the threat, this fight or flight response, adaptive physiological response. Increases that heart rate, pushes blood flow around in our bodies so that we can move those big muscles and do what we need to do to rise to the challenge. Now that fight or flight response is only designed to work for a few minutes, like maybe 10 or so. And then if we're still under a threat for a longer period of time, we have like a secondary backup system that kicks in to help support those long-term stressors. And again, this is adaptive physiological response that adapted in times when, we were hunter-gatherer tribes and we would have times of famine or maybe war. And we actually needed to be able to survive longer. And so this hormonal stress response, which cortisol is a big part of, I'm not going to get too deep into the science here and nerd out on it very much, but it's there to support us over time. And the implications of too much cortisol in our systems, of this backup stress generator, over time in our lives can start causing pretty severe negative impacts on our bodies, resulting in things like heart disease and diabetes and all of this physiological stuff. So it's a real physiologic injury that can happen. It also makes it so that we stop having that capacity for making great decisions. And it's not necessarily saying like in the moment you're not as functional, because it's still an elevated stress response and it can still help you do things that are hard, but it starts draining you. It starts making you stay awake at night. You just feel fatigued all of the time. So these are some of the things that I was experiencing. And I realized looking back that, especially when I was about to go climbing, especially on this objective that I was talking about a moment ago, I wasn't sleeping very well at night beforehand. I was dreading going. In fact, if I really had to define it then, I kind of hated rock climbing. But I still went because I thought it was what I should be doing, because I was here having the best time of my life, like in a dream job. I should be having a good time. I should still be getting after it. So this, when does stress become stress injury? I really like this diagram, and sorry in the back if you can't see all of the words, but this idea that stress and performance are correlated with each other, and that with more stress, your performance can increase to a peak until there's too much stress. And then you have that overwhelm that makes it so that basically I can't handle it anymore. And then we get these stress injuries, we get burnout, we get PTSD at the severe end of it. And so this is just a nice diagram to kind of have in the back of your mind, and I'll come back to it in a little bit here. How many of you have seen the stress continuum before? Good, it's getting out there. So this is a tool that Laura McGladdery, the founder of Responder Alliance, adapted from the military, who were using it as a deployment tool to check in with people to see how stress impacted they were before they went out into combat. And Laura took it to adapt it to more day-to-day lives as first responders, as outdoor folks. And what I've seen, and I know a bunch of you have seen this already, so that's great. I love that it's starting to spread, but it's like a light bulb moment for a lot of people. Where they're like, oh, this over here on the green side of things is when I feel alive, when I feel ready to go do anything. I can take on those challenges in the mountains. And then over time, as we're exposed to more and more stressors, we start moving toward the red and we start experiencing these symptoms of stress. And we have a bunch of these stress injury or stress continuum cards out there if people want to take one. I also have a QR code that you can scan that you're going to be able to access these, so you can look at it a little more closely if you can't see all the words that are up there. The idea is that this is such a great tool to start identifying, am I in the right headspace for this? Because what we know about stress injuries is that if you're already stressed and then you add on more stress and trauma, that's when you're more likely to have a resulting long-term stress injury like post-traumatic stress disorder. So we want to avoid that. We want to recognize when we're in this impacted state and do things that are pointing you toward the green rather than pointing you toward the red. So this is just a self-awareness tool. And what I like to think about, everybody always asks me, so what happens if you're in the red? Like, what do you do? Well, there's some basic needs that we all have. And I think this is where I've nerded out lately, is that we teach about psychological first aid, how to give people their basic psychological support needs to help them find this sense of safety again, to de-stress, to reduce that physiological response of stress. And what's really interesting is that a lot of other animals, so all animals have a stress response, right? A lot of mammals have a way to complete the stress cycle where if they're in a life-threatening situation, they'll do physiological things to bring them back down to kind of their baseline calm state. And humans in our day-to-day lives don't really do that. Or some of us do, but we don't maybe know that we're doing it. And so knowing that there are ways to do that is kind of what this whole thing is about. The psychological first aid stuff that we talk about, it also is pretty much the same stuff that, like, if you've studied psychology, it's our Maslow's hierarchy of needs kind of fit into these things. Self-determination theory, our motivators are all kind of fitting into these same principles, these same concepts. That, as my example of this in another animal, is antelopes. If they get chased by a lion on the plains of Africa and they get away, that's a really stressful experience, right? Life-threatening. They get away and then they will quiver. They will actually do this for a few moments, and that releases the stress hormones in their body and kind of sets them back to baseline. So that's kind of what we're trying to teach you all here, is how to come back to baseline. Not necessarily quivering. You could try that. Exercise is a really good thing, though. So what these principles are, I've just thrown up some images here to kind of think about them in your own mind. But safety. What makes you feel safe? And I don't know, growing up, we used to have pecan pies in the holidays, and I always thought that this was a good image of, this makes me feel safe. And you have the food nourishment that you need and something that is like connected to a safe place like home. A sense of calm. And one of my favorite tools for coming back to a sense of calm is just your breath. You have that with you all the time. And if you can slow your breathing rate down, that also helps slow your heart rate down and brings you back to a more physiologic baseline. Connection with other humans. And I think it's really special that we're all here in this room having this conversation, connected around the mountains, around mental health in the mountains. And this is one little piece of connection that we all have, but reaching out to people when you need it, and reaching out to people when you know they need it. Something that we can forget about, but is one of the most powerful tools. I was actually just talking to an old friend that has been, like a lot of us were working from home back in the pandemic, but then like I work from home now by myself in my own little space a lot. And it's like, it's lacking in connection. So making sure that you're getting out and getting through the connection. As a psychological first aid principle, this sense of efficacy, where you're like, I am capable, I can do this thing. It's also talked about as autonomy, like your ability to make your own decisions. It's different ways of wording it. All of these activities that you all raised your hands about, reasons why you recreate in the mountains, these are kind of skill-based things. You have to have some knowledge to do them, some practice to get good at them. And they give us a sense of efficacy in doing, which is really great. And I'm going to hit on this again in a moment here. It can have that flip side where you're like, I'm going to keep doing this thing like I did, or I'm just like, I'm going to do it more and more, go harder and harder all the time. So just something to acknowledge and be careful of it. And then the sense of hope, or looking toward a brighter future, that things can get better. And you know that maybe within these other tools, you have some things in your toolkit to get better, to move back toward green on the stress continuum. So those are the 5 principles that are for psychologic first aid. I want to come back to this stress continuum here. And I want you all to think about, this is just the blank one. So if you didn't see the words up on the other one, it's fine, because I want you all to just think about some of the ideas of things that are behavior or feelings, things that indicate that you are in the green, that you're not stress impacted, that you're ready to do anything, and that you could take on more stressors if they came your way. What are some things for you that would fall into this green category? And then after you've thought about that for a moment, also think about, what are some things that would be indicators for you? If you're making good risk management decisions about when you go out into the mountains and when you're doing risky things, what are indicators to say, hey, I'm not actually ready for that. I am stress impacted. Yellow, orange, red. Hopefully we notice them when they're in the yellow and orange before they get to the red. But what are 1 or 2 things there that you all can think of? So I mentioned that we have a little handout of these things. So responder alliance tools, if you all have phones and you want to scan this QR code, it allows you to access the stress continuum, both the one that has all the words on it and this blank one. Some psychologic first aid tools. And there's one more thing in there that I'm blanking on right now. But if you do want to pull that up, this is a place that you could make a note, the blank stress continuum in there. You'll have to download it to do this. Download it and then open it up on your phone and actually write in some of these things for each category, 1 or 2 things for each category. If you don't have your phone and you don't want to do that, you can sit with these and think about it, or you can write it down. And then next, I'm going to have you talk to a partner about it. So I'm going to give you, let's say, about 3 minutes to either jot this down on your phone, on paper, and then have a little discussion. Share a couple of these things, indicators of what makes you feel like you're in each one of these categories. Go.
Yeah.
Talking about yourself, maybe sharing something that maybe you haven't talked about too much, just how you respond to stress. Does anyone want to share one thing that is an indicator that they know that they're in green?
Sleeping well.
Sleeping well, yeah. That is definitely hands down one of the best, most healthy things for you. Yeah. Anything else?
Patient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Feeling motivated.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you again for participating in this. We'll come back to this again a little bit too. The other thing that I want to talk about is when we're starting to feel impacted and these colors might fade away, these awareness of ourself and what makes us feel good, and awareness of what these stressors are kind of fades away. And we start doing things to make ourselves feel better, but they're not actually necessarily good for us because it's kind of subconscious. These things that we like to call numbing tools, where it's like, this feels good in the moment, but long term, it might actually be adding to the stress in our life or just unhealthy physically activities. And I'm not going to make you share what your numbing tools are. Because we all probably have them. They're all probably there in the back of our minds as we think about this. We're like, oh yeah, I do that thing. But I am curious if anybody wants to say, oh, I've seen somebody do this. My friend. Just like feel free to shout out a couple of things that you think are kind of indicators that you are maybe somewhere on that side of the stress continuum, but not really acknowledging it and numbing it away.
Alcohol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how do you know alcohol? And you don't have to say this about you, but because alcohol can be like also this fun social activity, right? This like, which connection is meaningful and supportive to our psychology. How do we know when alcohol becomes a numbing tool?
Like excessive drinking and drinking alone, I think are the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Such a common one. So prevalent. Yeah. Anything else? I saw a hand back there.
Long form solo endurance mission. So like isolating and like putting yourself in like a physically stressful situation. I'll like see people do that.
I feel called out right now. Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Other thoughts? Yeah.
Having an injury from their activity and maybe not giving it enough time to heal or not giving it that recovery that they need.
Just kind of driving your body forward. Yeah.
Do you feel called out on that?
In your face. A little bit. Although I've been taking really good care of this thing, actually. I'm following all the instructions. Yeah.
I'll actually pull back from my connections. I'll push people away and like break off my communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So we can see some of how these things correlate to we're trying to find some semblance of safety, or we're trying to find by like pushing our bodies, we're trying to find some sense of efficacy. It's like this subconscious response to actually tapping back into what's going to make us better psychologically, but they can manifest in unhealthy ways. So these are just things to be mindful of and careful about. And again, something that I would write down, take note of, just make it really clear to yourself what these numbing tools are. Because if you're aware of your numbing tools, then you know when you're numbing, and then you know that you need to be doing something different. You need to actually be taking care of yourself and reaching out to people, finding that sense of calm and safety. So just some thoughts to keep in the back of your mind. Okay, so we go back to this moment on the slab where I couldn't move. I was frozen. Was I making good decisions at that point? I couldn't make a decision at all, right? So that's kind of this indicator of this stress injury. And yes, it can be a little more hazardous for us to go out in the mountains when we're stress injured because we're not making as good of decisions or not able to make decisions at all. Luckily, in this moment, I had an amazing climbing partner who just knew what to say and talked me back to the anchor, and we bailed to the ground from there. And nothing bad happened that day, except I realized that I was messed up. And I started actually noticing, oh, I'm dreading going rock climbing. I'm not sleeping as well at night. Like, need to do something about this. Like, I want to rock climb more. And so being this was a rock climbing problem, right? Like, I wasn't acknowledging that this was actually a psychology problem, but this is a rock climbing problem. I'm going to go talk to a performance psychologist, a sport and performance psychologist that was going to help me rock climb better and deal with my fear and my issues with climbing. So that's what I did. And she's a great human and actually helped me a lot, helped me recognize this stress injury piece. And she got me to really look at myself and what I was doing and asked me some really poignant questions that have stuck with me to this day. She asked, why do you climb? I want you all to kind of fill in the blank here. Why do you do these things that you're doing, whether it was the biking, skiing, climbing, psych, running, all the things that were mentioned? Why do you do these things? And for me, I had to just really answer that question. And I came up with some great answers after thinking about it for a while. And then she also asked me, what else is going on in your life? Which she wasn't telling me that I was stress impacted. She didn't use the word stress injury. But when she asked me that question, I was like, oh yeah. I had been responding to these awful SARS. I had lost some friends. My mother had passed away like 6 months before. And I went and soloed a big wall, hauled out there. I was doing all these things that were just like more and more stressful and like absorbing a bunch of real sad, traumatic stuff. And that gave me this sense of it's okay to be where I'm at right now. And I don't have to be pushing all of the time. Kind of acceptance of, oh, it's normal to be experiencing what I'm experiencing. And then she asked me, what does balance look like? So kind of combining all of these things where I had defined what the best things about climbing were for me and answered the question of what else was going on in my life. How did I reconcile? How did I balance those things to come back to a place where I was more in the green and not so stress impacted? And I'm not going to get into all of my answers to these questions, but they were powerful questions. And I'm going to move forward to what kind of happened next in my life is I wound up spending a bunch of time in Lander, Wyoming, and then eventually moved there because sport climbing was like a lot of fun. It was a more green choice with climbing that had all the other things about climbing that I loved, but without all of the risk. And then I stopped doing search and rescue for a little while, came back to it later. Because doing the stuff that was more fun, and this is what I imagined. And it helped me create a better life, a more relaxed, calm way of living and recreating. And so it went from this, like, I can't handle this, to this, where noticing that middle dotted line of like, I can handle it to I can't handle it, moving over to the right. What I've learned since then in all of my nerding out on psychology is that you can actually develop resilience to stress. There's this amazing concept that has been referred to as stress acclimatization. And I really like that, especially for people that know the mountains. You know that when you're going up in altitude, you need to acclimatize. You can't just keep going up and up and up, or you'll get altitude sickness. Similar with stress. If you keep going more and more stressful, you'll get stress injured. What's the key for acclimatization? Any thoughts? Slow.
Come back down.
Come back down. Exactly. So the like climb high, sleep low adage, like that resonates with stress. If you go into stressful situations and then have success under those stressful situations, that sense of efficacy, then you develop more of an ability to respond to those stressful situations. But you need to come back down. You need to recover. You need to come back into the green, let your nervous system rest so that you can do it again. So that's what I discovered in all of this as I started finding the balance of sport climbing more and trying really hard routes that weren't risky, and then speckling that in with still going into the mountains and still doing hard things that fed that passion, because challenge was one of the things that I value in climbing. Created this sense of I am capable of operating under stress. I am resilient to the impact of these things that can happen to me. So I fell back in love with rock climbing, and it was amazing, and I was climbing harder than ever before, and kind of started doing the like, I'm gonna go do bigger, harder, scarier things faster again. And this leads me to an incident that occurred when I was doing one of those big, hard, scary things. I was speed climbing on the nose of El Cap, which meant that, it's a 3,000-foot wall, and most people take, 3 to 5 days to climb it. A lot of people these days will do it in a day. We were trying to go basically as fast as we could, with the goal of trying to climb multiple walls in Yosemite in one day. So we were like, we want to be able to do this thing in like 5 or 6 hours. And we were cutting lots of corners when we were doing it. And one of the things that we were doing with this, and how many people have climbed on El Cap or know about the nose route a little bit? Few people. So there's this thing called the king swing on the nose, where you'll climb up, attach yourself to the anchor, lower back down, and swing across the face. There's a way to make this more efficient and not have to come back down and go across. But if the leader goes up and doesn't place any gear, then the second can just swing across. And so that's what we were doing. My partner had not placed any gear, and she fell. And she impacted that ledge there where you can see, this is the rescuers after that incident. Texas Flake is what that ledge is called. She impacted that ledge and she survived. And it was a very traumatic experience for everyone involved, and it changed the course of her life. And it changed the course of my life too. But in that moment, I was really still very psyched on rock climbing, and I wanted to come back to it. Right where this image is happening, after Quinn was flown off of the mountain, I had a couple of great other rescuers, former people that I worked with on YOSAR that came in. And Aaron Smith was the guy that was with me after they flew her off. And he had me like take a few deep breaths before we started doing anything. And he's like, okay, Josie, can you go unfix the rope above us? Great. And then he had a bunch of rescue gear with him. And he's like, okay, Josie, are you able to lead the rappels while I have all of the gear and I can rappel after you? And I was like, yeah, I can do that. Got down to the ground. I was going to drive home, and my former supervisor, Phil Johnson, said, Josie, you're not driving home. Come to my house, come have some tea. And then he asked a couple of the SAR team members to drive me home. And I want to illustrate those points, remembering the steps that were taken kind of after that rescue. And then thinking about all of what I had learned to this point to kind of come back to climbing after I'd already been stress injured. I had some tools in my toolbox already. And then I was given really good psychologic first aid on the scene and after the scene. These things that gave me a sense of efficacy, that gave me this connection, calmed me down, gave me this safety. These were things that I really needed in that moment. And in the weeks after, I looked back on this incident a bunch of times, and as the brain does when we're exposed to major traumas, we try to find answers to things, try to find reasons, try to, in fact, oftentimes like blame ourselves for things. And I spiraled a lot, but my memories of the incident, a lot of the things that stuck with me were the things that I had done during the incident that gave me that sense of efficacy. And now that I have this language and now I know what psychological first aid can do for people, I was like, oh, these guys really saved me in that moment because it gave me something good to think about when I was spiraling, when I was having a hard time. And so I was able to, it took me a long time. The next months were extremely hard. It was a journey. But I have come back again to being able to climb and love climbing the way that I did before. So I asked these few questions early on. Making these decisions, managing the risks in the mountains, there's a few questions. It's this, why are you going out there? And then when bad things happen, what can you do to prevent it from getting worse? Essentially, those psychological first aid components. And then the final piece of how do we come back to it? And I think that that's just an answer that we all have to answer for ourselves. And we're going to do another little activity here in a moment to kind of think about. But knowing why you go out there in the first place is going to help you with that answer of coming back to it again. And practicing this acceptance. So being gentle with yourself, knowing that, you made decisions to go do things that you wanted to do. You were excited about them and you knew why you were doing them, and still things can happen. And not beating yourself up as much as you can to recognize that you're human too, and bad things can happen. And then finding that balance. So what is that balance for you? What are the things that you can do in your life to reduce the stressors that you're taking on and to really add to this stress recovery piece? The exercising, the connection, the downtime, creating that sense of calm. Those are the things. So Responder Alliance has this tool. That's the other tool that's in that packet that I sent out to you. If you downloaded it, but there's a thing called the Individual Resilience Plan that's in there. If you scan that code, same code as before, it's not a new one. But what's in that is a way of making a plan for yourself so that you know all the things that you kind of should be doing consistently, taking care of yourself to reduce stress, but also to come back to when bad things happen and remember I need to do these things. And within that are some very specific commonalities that we have found, and I should say Laura, who founded our organization and studies stress resilience, in her work as a therapist, seeing all of these first responders, law enforcement, fire, etc., seeing them come to her, they had similarities in their habits if they were in this resilient space. There were people that could keep coming to work, doing this hard, stressful work on a day-to-day basis and still have that vitality for it. And then the same thing with outdoor guides, recreationists, had these practices, and they're all within that plan in those categories. So the categories that are in there, if you're not looking at it, are things that you can do to recharge, things that are exciting to you in a non-stressful way. And exercise can be one of those kind of lower key things, right? It's not, I'm gonna go do this big, hard, scary thing as my recharge. And I'm like, I'm gonna go out and go sport climbing instead, or I'm gonna go for a nice hike instead of trying to run an ultra. That's a way that you can recharge. Just examples. Connection. Like, who are those people specifically? Who are those people in your life that you can connect with? And then what kind of things can you do community-wise to really generate that? Creating space for yourself, especially when we're impacted by stress and trauma. Our brains need to kind of recalibrate. We need to be able to integrate a new worldview, a new perspective, new information that we didn't really have in our system before we were exposed to something stressful. So taking time to, meditate, take walks, take space for yourself where you're not getting more input, but you're actually processing. So that doesn't have to be anything specific, but what's an idea of that for you? Let's see. On that individual resilience plan, I think it is labeled as mission. But that's essentially, it's labeled that as like for people in a stressful line of work, like why they're doing that work, like what is the mission? But that aligns exactly with what I started with you today, which is what is this value? Like, why are you doing this activity that you're doing? Who has that thing pulled up right now? Did I miss one? I feel like there was one more there. Health is the other one. So anything that is taking care of your health and is a regular habit, good sleep habits, like making commitments to going to bed at a certain time of night, not like scrolling or, watching lots of movies before you go to bed and staying up late, getting good, healthy food, hydrating. Like, I know this sounds silly, but it's like, it's real. The more we take care of our physiology, the more we're going to be resilient to stressors. So those are the things that can create resilience for you. And it's better to do them as planning now than it is to wait until you're really stress impacted to be like, okay, what do I need to do next? And I knew, so I had surgery on my knee a few months ago, and I knew that it was going to be really hard for me because I'm an active person. This was going to be a psychological stress, and I was losing one of my ways of recharging. And so I dedicated, I am going to meditate every morning. No matter what, I'm going to give myself that space, even if it's 5 minutes. And I've been doing that for almost 3 months now, and it has helped me not lose it because it's been really hard. So that's kind of an example of pre-planning these what we call green choices, things that can help you manage the stresses in your life. So last little activity for you all. You've been probably thinking about ideas. I just want you to turn to the person you were chatting with before or somebody new and tell them something. You can tell them one thing that you're already doing that fits in one of these categories, and one thing that you're like, yeah, I really would like to start doing this on a regular basis. See if you can kind of commit to that as a new green choice way to keep yourself sane when stressful things happen. Go.
Something I already.
All right, I hear lots of great conversations going on. So again, thanks for participating in all of this. I have a question for you all. Who knows? Ken, you can't answer this. You can't answer it either. Who knows who Paul Piana is?
Who?
Paul Piana.
He started Paul's Pizza.
Did he start Paul's Pizza?
No, I'm just
Not
kidding.
that I know. Tell us all who Paul Piana is.
Me?
Yeah.
He's a climber. I lived in Lander when I was there, and he had a long history with like Todd Skinner and all those guys doing a bunch of routes. That's about all I know about him, so I'm sure there's more. But
Does anybody else know anything else about him? It was just sort of he's a legend in my mind. He's like one of my all-time heroes. And yes, everything that you said was absolutely like he's well known for a lot of the developing climbing in Lander as well as big routes all over the world, free climbing, amazing stuff. Anyway, this was a complete non sequitur, but I do have a prize. Responder Lions patch. I threw this Robert Hunter quote up, which is a Grateful Dead lyric if you're not familiar, but once in a while you can get shown the light in the strangest of places if you look at it right. And I think this quote has been something that's like, oh yeah, that's right. This is why I'm here. And it's brought me back to that value when I'm kind of a little lost and feeling stressed or not knowing why I'm doing anything anymore. Just got to look at things a little bit differently, and maybe you'll get shown the light. So that was a quote I wanted to end with. And then I'm here to answer any questions. I also had just a couple of little plugs if you're interested. If you are a first responder in the state of Wyoming, we have a bunch of Responder Alliance trainings that have been paid for by the Wyoming State Health Department. So you can get access to those if you're interested in more about stress injury and managing major incidents in your work. Come chat with me and I can give you some information about that. We also fairly recently started the Responder Alliance Foundation, which is a nonprofit that helps to fund research around stress injury, as well as provide trainings to people where cost is a barrier. We have scholarship kind of stuff available. So little plug for the Responder Alliance Foundation. We're accepting donations to help promote this stuff and support the work. So those are my two little nuggets. And I'll take some questions if anyone has any.
I have a question.
I know you did because you asked me.
Were there any conversations that you had with your climbing partner that still stick with you as a part of that healing process and resilience piece?
Yeah, actually, when you first started asking that question, what came to mind was actually some conversations that we had before climbing that day, where we were both really tired and hadn't slept that night that well the night before. And we went anyway. And so the conversations around that, but also the conversations we did not have around whether or not we should actually be doing the thing that we did. So that's like part A, answering that question that I kept going back to of like, oh, there were some reasons we didn't sleep. Maybe there was some intuition there. And there were definitely conversations that in the future, talking more about how you're feeling, talking more about the risks that you're taking, that kind of thing ahead of time. Afterward, a lot of people thanked me for saving her life. She thanked me. I blamed myself for some of the things that happened in there. And so at first, when I was hearing those things, those pieces of gratitude, I didn't like hearing them. Like I didn't feel like I had done something right. I thought I had done all the things wrong. But as the time went by and as I was able to kind of come back to, oh yeah, these were the things that like I did in making the rescue happen. And then I did afterward because Aaron asked me to, like, those were the things that came back to me. And so I think like, if I'm going to pull a nugget of wisdom out of that is trying to listen and hear what people have to say to you, because so many people had really great things to say to me that were helpful.
like a time frame from healing from these stress injuries? Like, can you access stuff that happened years ago, or is it like that's set in your brain and it's there forever?
I'll answer a little bit of that and say, like, I'm not a therapist. I'm just someone who's nerded out a lot on psychology in my life. And so there's like a lot more that I don't know about answering those questions. What I do know is that the more stress I said this earlier on, but the more stress you're under when you're exposed to traumatic stuff, it's usually kind of an equation of these things that creates a longer term stress injury. It's not usually just like one incident causes PTSD. And so underlying things from a long time ago, if you haven't kind of worked through them, if they're still present in your mind and body, they can impact you and lead to other stressors. And if you have dealt with hard things and you've recovered from them and you have some efficacy of successful recoveries from stress, then you've actually built some resilience. So those things actually might serve you. And our nervous systems and everyone's individual and different with this stuff. And so there's still a lot that we don't know about how people process stress and trauma. But I think, again, if I was to, I know I just sort of rambled with a bunch of answers to that, but I think if I was to pull one thing out of it, it's to keep using something like the stress continuum to maintain a sense of awareness so that you can come back to some resiliency practices when you're feeling stressed rather than putting yourself out there into more stress again. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could speak a little bit just to like general tactics for on-scene psychological first aid.
Yeah. So in that little handout, if you scanned it, there's a card that goes through. It's an ABCDE mnemonic that goes along with the 5 principles of psychological first aid. And there's some little tidbits that are written in there of things that you can do. But I'll hit on those a little bit, but just know that resource is there if you want to come back to it. So establishing a sense of safety for someone on scene or just after they've been exposed to something major. One of the most powerful things you can do is kind of remove them from whatever the hazard is and then say, now that you're safe. And like that exact language actually has a really powerful way of calming the nervous system. It doesn't have to be those specific words, but something that's like saying, yes, you are safe. And then calm, lending them your own nervous system. If you're familiar with mirror neurons, we have this ability to respond to what someone else is projecting. It's why humans are such social creatures. And so if you're able to speak with a tone of calm, present with calm body language, take deep breaths, that's going to give them a sense that, again, they're safe and they can be calm. And those two things, so when our nervous system is in a really heightened stress response, we have the fight, flight, freeze responses. If someone's in those kind of like fully reactive fight, flight, or freeze modes, getting them to feel calm and safe so that then they can respond and have some efficacy in the situation. Those should be the first things that you do. Otherwise, like anything else you do, they're not going to track. And then connecting with them. So whether it's you trying to connect and just be supportive and listen, or it's saying like, who is someone that can be here with you right now, or that we can call, that would be a really powerful connection to you. And then if they're able to, like, what can they do in this event, this time and place, just like Aaron asked me when I was on the wall, like, hey, can you go get that rope down? Can you actually lead the rappels down? If you can get them engaged in their own rescue, care, whatever they're doing, and help them make decisions too, where like, if it's too complex, it might be too much. But if there's like oh, here's a couple of options of what you can do, then they make some decisions and they start moving out of that stress response a little bit. And then just offering the senses of hope of like, oh, we have, rescue coming, or like things are getting better. I mean, depending on the circumstances, hope is sort of a hard thing to speak to, but just that idea that like, yeah, right now is bad, but like, things are coming to make it better.
And bystanders too. You can
Mm-hmm.
give them something to do.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
Have you seen any professional athlete teams systematize resilience or stress responses in creative ways? Or is it still just really difficult?
In terms of like mountain athletes?
Yeah.
I have not necessarily, although I do know that there's some athlete teams that are having like sports psychologists come talk to them, and what I really, after working with a sports psychologist myself, and I'm actually about to start a graduate program in sports psychology, there's a lot of principles that are very similar to this stress resilience work that underlie the work in sports psychology. So it is out there a little bit, just this language isn't out there as much. I would love to start doing just having known so many people in the industry that are exposed to it. I'd love to get more Responder Alliance work into those athlete teams for sure. Yeah. So if you know anybody, send them my way. Well, thanks again, everyone, for being here. Thanks, Maddie, and thanks Teton County SAR for hosting.
Yeah, Josie, thank you so much for sharing your story. That was really valuable, and I hope everyone took at least one nugget away from this conversation tonight. I'll just say again, we've got so many folks in this room committed to preventing bad things from happening. Just because you are here, you are learning, you're growth minded. It's really awesome to be a part of a community like this one where you commit your time, almost 2 hours on Thursday night, which is beautiful outside. You could be mountain biking, etc. We love that you're here. We have a lot of workshops coming up in the next few months across the summer, all things wilderness medicine, digital mapping. Next week, we have our first ever horsey and hunting workshop. So if you want to dial in your skills, we are here to provide. And if you have any suggestions or needs, we're excited to hear them. So come find me, come find anyone on the staff or the volunteer team, grab some pizza on your way out. We've got a lot of swag from all of the tables in the back, so please help yourselves. And again, if you are interested in supporting our team of volunteers, we've got ways that you can donate in exchange for some swag. So we appreciate you. Thanks, Josie, again. Thanks, Dr. Danny.